Maybe you've got a confession for us as well, in which case you send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Brother Matthew, Sister Holly, Susie in the house. Today's confession comes from Moz. Thanks, Moz. Simon and team, the following event took place over 56 years ago.
Wow.
And is a well-kept secret, not just by myself, but also all the members of my family, including my mother, father, 2 brothers, and 2 sisters.
Wow.
I was around 4 years old. I don't know what point the cutoff is where you can not be forgiven, but 4 seems quite young.
Yes.
Anyway, I was around 4, and I was in the same infant class as my twin sister. My other brothers and sisters were also at the same junior and infant school, but in the older classes. This school was a wonderful little school set on the south side of Birmingham. The headmistress at this time was the frightening 7 foot 4 inch tall and 4 foot wide Brunhilde, a formidable German woman. As per some schools at the time, pets were often in the classes, and if you were good, you perhaps were given the responsibility of looking after them, feeding them, cleaning out the cages, and so on. In our particular class, we had an enormous guinea pig we called Hercules, and he was a friendly ginger pet, and we all loved him very dearly. Regular confessions listeners will know.
Where are we going
these
here?
only end one way.
Yeah.
During the summer holidays, when the school was closed, families were vetted to see who would like to take one of the school pets home to look after during the long 7 weeks. For some reason, our family had never been selected. Perhaps the fact that Debbie Miles, who lived next door to us, had seen my dad accidentally cycle over their cat's tail and deliberately told my form teacher, which didn't help with the selection process.
Oh, very good.
Well, I was determined that this year we were going to get selected. I did all the usual sucking up to my form teacher and advising my sister also to do the same. I mentioned how much I loved animals and the presenter of an animal program at the time, Johnny Morris. I made sure that I spread lies about other families in contention. And how they all had vicious guinea pig eating dogs in their houses. Well, the time came just before the end of term, and my mother was called to see Fraulein Brunhilde and was informed that we had been... Sadly, there's no German for me to say here. We'd been chosen to take Hercules home for the summer. There were, of course, strict rules for looking after such a well-loved animal. Feeding the right food, cleaning out the hutch and cage regularly. My mother ensured that Hercules would be treated like royalty for all the time that he was with us. The end of term finally arrived, and my dad managed to balance the cage, including Hercules, on the handlebars of his bike, with Debbie Miles closely inspecting the tyres for any residue cat-tail fur. Anyway, and off we went home. After a couple of days, the novelty of looking after Hercules wore off for my older brothers and sisters, and it was left to just me and my twin sister to take on the role of chief carers. On about day 6 of the holidays, us twins, age 4, I remind you, began to feel sorry for poor Hercules and his boring green diet and plain old water. Also the fact that we'd run out of healthy food for him, and we couldn't be bothered to go round to the local co-op to replenish it. So we both decided to improvise, and we pulled up just about anything green from the garden and local fields and stuffed it in the front of the enormous beast. We also thought that orange squash and melted tip-top popsicles might be a nice change for him, and watched in amazement as he chugged on the bottle filled with the new colourful nectar. Do you remember tip-top popsicles?
Yes, absolutely.
Holly doesn't.
No.
It was basically a nice lolly in a plastic thing, so it would just melt that and put it in the guinea pigs.
Right.
2 days, obviously, it didn't work. 2 days later, our mum found poor Hercules had gone to the great wheel in the sky. Every scrap of evidence of our involvement regarding the new diet was removed. My mum had to contact the fearsome Fraulein Brunhilde. As we did not have a phone, we had to go next door to the Miles house and use there, much to the delight of Debbie when overhearing of the demise of poor Hercules. My mum, I think, said that it must have been a heart attack due to how much he ate, because he was a big old beast. Oddly, Brunhilde was quite sympathetic to what had happened, but insisted that we were to keep him and bring him back to school after the summer holidays, so that the other children could say goodbye, pay their respects, and we would have him interred in the school gardens. As we didn't have a fridge or freezer, my dad took him to work and stuffed him out of sight at the back of the works freezer. At the start of the new term, we returned to our school with the frozen Hercules in a giant shoebox, and a cavernous hole was dug for him. We all shuffled past him, some lying in state.
Yeah.
Some of the girls and boys were crying. I went past and I did the right thing by throwing a nice fresh carrot onto the grave as a mark of respect. Please forgive me and my twin sister and the rest of our family for what we did, also depriving other more caring families from looking after poor Hercules. My family hasn't spoken about this story for over 50 years, and it would be nice to remind them all that it was not just down to me and my twin. I suspect that is the sole purpose of this confession. It wasn't just supposed to be me. It was supposed to be all of us. I think that's what you all agreed. But no, after a couple of days, it was suddenly down to us. So we thought a quick popsicle and the rest of the hay from the neighbouring fields would do nicely. Sister Holly.
Right, well, who put the Glad and Gladiator? Hercules. But they didn't, because he died, and they didn't feed him properly. They didn't look after him properly.
No.
Also, they spread lies. They said that they said, these families that they've got these dogs, they're vicious dogs that kill guinea pigs.
Yes.
It was all lies. And actually, if he had been looked after by those nice families, he may still be with us now to this day.
I think that's unlikely.
Really,
Guinea pigs don't live for 60 years.
Did they not?
I don't believe so, no.
Well, I think, I don't forgive at all, really. So, yes, you may have been four, and there should have been really some more parental supervision, but still, Moz, I'm afraid, can't forgive.
In a court of law, you'd get away with it, but not this particular court.
No.
Brother from another gutter.
I'm going to forgive because, these guinea pigs, they never last the whole... how long are the school holidays? 6 weeks? Never going to last 6 weeks, is it? Hercules. Everyone knew at the start of that confession, Hercules is going to be shuffling off the coil pretty much by the end of this confession. I love the fact that he was sowing dissent about his neighbours and their dogs in order to win that particular election. I think that works well. And I am going to say, what on earth is Brunhilde doing saying you've got to keep hold of the dead gerbil for another 6 weeks?
Yes.
That seems ridiculous. Yeah. And they don't even have a freezer. The children are going to see this rotting corpse? I don't think that works. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, right, I think I followed that more or less. Okay,
Really?
So people's verdict, please, for tonight's guinea pig confession from Moz. But before the news, we had a confession from Moz. Well, I said it was from Moz. I was just making up the names, even though the crime was many, many decades ago. In fact, when Moz was 4 and involved the death of a gigantic guinea pig, it wasn't... Well, was it Moz's fault? That's the question. Have the people's verdict, has it come in?
So Rachel says forgiven. Top marks for the campaign to get the guinea pig back to their house. They didn't know that the exciting food was bad for Hercules, who could well have been on his way towards guinea pig heaven anyway. And I suspect Brunhilde knew that. Jason says, yes, I forgive Moz and his twin because they were only small children, and a small animal like that doesn't last very long. Chances are, if it was a big one for the type of animal it was, then it wasn't going to last long anyway. And Joe in Norfolk says, hi Simon, forgiven. When my children were young, we had the school hamster for half term. They felt sorry for him and let him out of the cage to stretch his legs, and the cat ate him.
Right, okay. I suspect there are quite a few of those. I don't want any more confessions which involve the school pets not making it to the end of the confession.
No.
So, obviously, you also need to say, if you do have guinea pigs or any kind of pets, always follow the rules.
Yes.
And they will involve not just pulling up any old grass and not feeding it popsicles.
Probably don't do that.
In
no.
general.
No.
If you have a confession, we would love to see it, please. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. That is the email address. That was Jammin' Bob Marley. We got Brother Matthew.
Yes.
Sister Holly Susie. So cool. Today's confession comes from Lady Linda. Thank you, Lady Linda. Hello, says Lady Linda. I have a confession to make. Indeed. It's all true, not made up, and I've now emigrated to the Republic of Ireland, so feel safe enough to make this one public.
Oh.
Back in 2006, myself and my partner, I will call him Matt, were living in a vague English county.
A vague English county.
I think I've made it vague. Anyway. We wanted to be self-sufficient and grow our own veg and keep chickens and stuff. And as I was able to get a transfer with work, we managed to buy an old empty house in the deepest countryside in another vague English county. The house had sat empty for 2 years, but it had nearly half an acre of unkempt gardens, so we were delighted with it. When we moved in, we had to sort the electrics and the water out pretty sharpish, so Matt rang the water company. On being told that the house had been empty for some time, the water company, who seemed a bit snarky, told us that the water main connection would have been capped off and that they would have to come out and look at it, which would cost 200 quid. Yes, just to come out and look at it, 200 quid.
Goodness.
Then they told us they would want more money to reconnect our house to the mains. Ouch. Matt gave me the news, and when he put the phone down, we sat and had a think. There was a paving slab on the driveway. We decided to take it up and see if there was anything underneath it. Hey presto, there was. It was a stopcock. We were very pleased and duly turned it on. Back in the house, we tried the taps. Fantastic. Yeah, water was coming out. Hooray. Anyway, when you relocate, there are lots of things to do. Your list is very long. We had to try and sort out all our stuff and deal with new jobs and so on. And as it happened, we forgot all about the water company for a very, very long time. In fact, by the time we realized that neither of us had actually rung the water company to set up a direct debit, quite a few years had passed. So many, in fact, that we dare not contact them now in case we got several years of water bills charged to us. We lived on a dead-end road, which had a couple of big farms on it. Water company vans used to come up and down from time to time. This would terrify us when we saw them, but they never stopped at our home. We were off the grid. Well, 7 years later, it's time to move on. We'd found a place with more land and sold our little house. We were feeling quite pleased with ourselves, having got away with no water bills for a long time. So imagine my horror when I found that as part of the paperwork for selling up, we had to produce utility bills.
Yeah.
We hadn't had a water bill for 7 years. Eventually, because there was no choice, I rang the water company. Hello, I said. I've recently moved into a house. Can I set up a direct debit, please? They told me that because they had no record of our address, they would send around somebody, which I thought odd, but there you go. Quite soon afterwards, a water van arrived at our house. A very nice man got out and agreed that there really was a house there. And had we been here long, he wanted to know. Oh, not long, I replied, crossing my fingers behind my back. Well, we got our utility bills sorted and moved to our new and bigger house. We never did pay a penny for all that water. It's only now that I'm living in Ireland, where you do not pay for your water, that I remembered just what we did back then.
Really?
And I've checked this, and Ireland is the only OECD country where you do not pay directly for your water. Lady Linda says, I now realise, obviously, that what I did, in fact, what we both did, could be considered as theft.
It could be.
And can never be justified under any circumstances.
No.
Although I'm not asking the water company for forgiveness because they were quite high-handed and brusque when we first rang, but we do feel a little bit sorry for the man in the van who had to come all the way out into the sticks for no real reason. Yours hoping for forgiveness. I think I've kept that suitably vague. I think we got away with that just about. Lady Linda, hoping for forgiveness. I know what Sister Holly Susie is going to say because the mantle of responsibility weighs heavy on her young shoulders.
Yes, well, yes, I think it's the lying, really, that's the problem here. You lied to the water company man's face that you'd only been there for a few weeks, and actually you'd been there for 7 years. And so, yeah, that wasn't great. Also, how did you live with the guilt and the fear? You know, every time you saw that water company van, it just sort of, a shudder went down your body. Why, when you could have just come clean and you would have been so much happier? That weight could have been lifted off your shoulders.
There's all the sewage in the rivers, of course, but that's something else.
And so, for that reason, yes, not forgiving.
Not forgiven. Okay, I knew that exactly that's what you were going to say because that's what you have to say.
I do.
However, brother from another gutter.
Well, I'm going to find myself in the Fergal Sharkey camp here because it is very difficult to find any way of saying that this can be condoned because obviously it cannot be condoned.
No, because
however, I'm going to find a way because this week I had to pay 100 quid for a man to come out and tell me that he had no idea how to fix my boiler. 100 quid to come out and say, I don't know. I could have just burned the money myself and saved him all the bother.
I don't think Fergal Sharkey is concerned about that.
Is he not?
No.
Well, he should be. Add that to the list, Fergal. I'm going to forgive because if it was just 200 quid to sort out the stopcock when it's just turning the stopcock, that's not good. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Impeccably argued.
Yes, I thought so.
Do you forgive Lady Linda for tonight? I suspect people are going to forgive just because it's a water company. I suspect that's what we're going to do. But anyways, the people's verdict, please. Entirely down to you. Do you forgive Lady Linda, yes or no? Even though she's saying, know that it's unforgivable. 61054. First word is Simon. Thank you very much. 9 minutes after 6. I am Simon, even though I don't sound like Simon.
Yes. Yeah.
Just with one of those throats. That's the way it's gone. Kim Wilde and the Bangles. And before the news, tonight's confession from Lady Linda. She and her other half basically moved to a new house and didn't pay water bills for 7 years because the water company, who remained anonymous throughout, didn't realise they were there. Anyway, so clearly that's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
The people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
Right, just about everyone is forgiving
I'm not
tonight, and
surprised.
it's mainly because they really don't like the water companies. Tim in Lancashire says, I'm going to forgive if the water company was silly enough to not be aware there was a house there and lots of water being used without realising, then they deserve not to be paid. Simple. Gary says, hi Simon, I live on the Isle of Man, and we also don't pay for water here because it's classed as essential. So I forgive Lady Linda. And finally, John, from an English county to the south of Scotland, says, hello, Matt and Simon. I totally forgive Lady Linda. We once bought a former Methodist chapel and converted it into a gym. We had over 200 members, and despite many attempts to get the local electricity company to admit that they were our supplier, we never paid a penny and got many happy years of free power for our treadmills, bikes, showers, heating, before selling up and moving on. So a drop of free water is completely acceptable.
Okay, so maybe you have a confession. Maybe that sparked some kind of thought deep in your conscience. Maybe you've lived off the grid. I don't know, maybe you've got an exciting tale for us. We'd like to hear all about it. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. On Greatest Hits Radio, where it is, I'm delighted to say, confession time. So gather round for today's tale, which comes from Mickey. Thank you, Mickey. Father Simon, Brother Matthew, and whichever sister is to be begged of her mercies this afternoon. Well, it's Sister Holly Susie who's in. And that was who you could hear saying, taking a break from her top production duties.
Indeed.
Mickey says, I am from West Yorkshire, and like all good Yorkshire folk, my friends and I were proud, incredibly proud, reet proud, you might say, to be from that marvellous nation. This pride in being from the White Rose County became particularly noted every summer in the late 90s when we attended a church camp. We sang Ilkley Moor Bartat whilst washing up. We gave hymns and Sunday school songs a Yorkshire twist, though no details are forthcoming. We dreamed of the day when Yorkshire would achieve its rightful status as an independent nation, complete with a seat on the UN Security Council.
Right.
One hot summer, in a field in Ripon, we founded the YICMA. YICMA. YICMA stood for the Yorkshire Independent Constitutional Monarchist Army.
Okay.
And as the name suggested, we aimed for an independent Yorkshire with a monarch. We considered offering the role to Michael Palin, but him being from South Yorkshire, we decided he wasn't quite northern enough.
No.
Patrick Stewart never replied to our invitation, but the offer remains open to him. Our first spot of independence activism involved a fake speed camera, which is a story for another time. It is for our second act that I seek forgiveness.
Okay.
Wow. Not long after returning from the church camp, my fellow freedom fighters and I purchased some frozen Yorkshire puddings, and we lay in wait outside the town hall. Our intention was to throw the puddings at our local councillors as they emerged from a meeting. We intended to shout, "Independence for Yorkshire," and make our escape.
Right.
That was the plan. It was perhaps a lack of understanding of the role and influence of local government that led us to target councillors. But when men in suits and ladies in smart dresses emerged from the imposing doors and began to descend the stone steps, we ran forward. We chucked what were by this point very much thawed Yorkshire puddings.
Of course.
We shouted the name of our glorious county, Yorkshire, and ran away. Which is not exactly what we intended, because we thought we were going to say independence for Yorkshire. But it came out just as one word.
It is just Yorkshire, yeah.
The following day, we all went to the newsagent to buy the local paper to see if our message of independence had made the front page. It had not. What had made the front page was a story about a group of yobs throwing balls of soggy dough at mourners who were emerging from a memorial service. which was being held in the town hall, who in their moment of grief were confronted by the forces of Yikmar, shouting Yorkshire and throwing Yorkshire puddings at them. It's a shocker. Anyway, Father Simon, I ask forgiveness, not for the throwing of Yorkshire puddings at this unfortunate group of mourners, for any true Yorkshire man or Yorkshire woman would take pride in being part of a just cause, even on such a sad occasion as a memorial service. Really? Really?
That's a stretch.
Instead, I seek forgiveness for the fact that nothing about Yorkshire, nothing about independence, or even about Patrick Stewart appeared in the newspaper. We had failed to make clear the reason for our Yorkshire pudding-based act, and our cause was not advanced. Those emerging from the town hall suffered their indignities in vain, and those tasty regional delicacies were wasted. I also realise, of course, that throwing things...
Oh, this doesn't feel tacked on. No. Yeah.
I realise, of course, now that throwing things is harmful, and it could endanger anyone. And if you have a pudding, you should not throw it at anybody, and it should be considered bad behaviour and not to be condoned under any circumstances. I'm not sure that a true Yorkshireman could forgive such failures, but being from a less marvellous part of the United Kingdom, I'm certain that you will, Father Simon. A little bit of regional conflict from Mickey. Okay. All right, very good. We made it to the bridge. So it's Mickey's confession. All about, I mean, who knew about the activities of the YICMA, the Yikmar Revolutionary Council? No, the Yorkshire Independent Constitutional Monarchist Army. Who knows what they've been up to since? The voice of authority and responsibility, Sister Holly Susie.
Yes, Mickey. Frankly, wasting good Yorkshire puddings. Yorkshire puddings are my favourite part of the roast dinner, and you're throwing them away when you could be eating them, and they're by far the best part, so why would you throw them? Ridiculous. Also throwing them at mourners, I mean, that's just a bad move all round. You didn't even say what it was for, you just shouted Yorkshire. I mean, what were they supposed to take away from that?
Yes.
And so really,
Thugs.
it was yes, exactly. It was just wrong on every level, and so not forgiven.
Okay, brother from another guy.
I mean, I detect two problems with the Yorkshire Independent Constitutional
Monarchist
ding-dong.
Army.
Correct. The first is, if you're I mean, it's a symbol for Yorkshire, the Yorkshire pudding. They're very proud of the Yorkshire pudding. Why would you throw it? You don't throw your symbol, your cherished...
You should throw the Lancashire hot pot.
Correct. You should be choosing something else to throw. Also, YICMA sounds a bit like YMCA.
Yeah.
That's the reason why it wasn't getting picked up in the papers. But on reflection, you know, it's been a sad day for the mourners, brightened up by being attacked by thawed-out frozen Yorkshire puddings.
I see.
And, you know, everyone's like, we all had a wonderful... Do you remember that funeral? Yes, I do, because we were attacked by puddings. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, well, we got there in the end.
Yeah.
People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Mickey? Yes or not? An awful lot will depend on where you're coming from, I think.
Yeah.
The Yorkshire Independent Constitutional Monarchist Army, and threw Yorkshire puddings at people who they thought were councillors. Turned out that they were mourners coming out of a funeral service, but wants forgiveness. So let's see how it's gone with the people's verdict.
Well, the people will give forgiveness depending on how they feel about Yorkshire or whether frozen Yorkshire puddings are okay. Steve in North Yorkshire says, you have to forgive him. We eat Yorkshire puddings with every meal, breakfast, lunch and dinner, so a few wasted is no problem. But Mark and Shelley Evans from Carlton near Pontefract say, Simon, I'm a proud Yorkshireman who has taught many nations how to cook the greatest pudding in the world, and it can never be frozen. Not forgiven.
Hadn't thought of that.
Tricky Dicky from Rotherham, totally forgiven. Best thing you can do with a frozen Yorkshire pudding is throw it away. Can't beat a homemade one. Frozen ones should be banned. Very funny story, though. And finally, Rob in Tarleton says, as a proud Lancashire lad, they are immediately not forgiven on the basis that Lancashire is far better anyway. On the other hand, however, I would prefer Yorkshire would be removed from the UK.
Good. Well, it's interesting to have touched on the War of the Roses again. Your confession will be welcome, please. Confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.